We are back in the black hole of real estate, and today I want to talk about something fun. It's your first Airbnb property. This is your host, Ron Weiss-Sikarski, for the black hole of real estate. And a lot of people are curious about these Airbnb properties, these short-term rental properties that we've heard so much about over the last several years. And a lot of people are making some good money, and others, not so much, and having some issues with it. So I thought today I would talk about the things that I would be looking for if I was going to make my first Airbnb property purchase. And before we get into that, there was an article, and this happened to be on Inman, and what they were talking about is in 2024 that 11% of all sales were investment homes, and they're saying that investors are getting out of the market at record rates. They're just fleeing the market. And I'm like, well, geez, okay, so if 11% of the sales in 2024 were investment property sellers getting out of the business, those properties didn't go into the black hole, did they? No, they didn't. An investor bought those. So if an investor sells it and an investor buys it, to me, that's neutral. That means if 11% got out, there's 11% that got in, maybe a lot of them for the first time. And I find it interesting when they sensationalize things, and that's how media is. Whenever you see an article like that, it's a paywall in front of it. Like, hey, by the way, if you want to know the rest of this, subscribe. So it's a great hook, and congratulations to them to get people to click on it. But as I dug a little bit deeper, it mentions 11% of sales in 2024 were investors fleeing the market and just bailing out. But I'm curious, what's a normal year? Because if somebody buys a home or sells a home, moves every 8 to 10 years, I started thinking about it. Well, every 8 years, that would be 1 in 12%. And if it was every 10 years, it would be 10%. So I'm thinking, all right, so if it's 8 or 10 years, it's 10 or 12%. And last year, 11% got out. Sounds about normal to me. So it wasn't like 11% more than the year before or anything else. Maybe a normal year was 10%, it was up 1%. And to me, it's a big deal. But more to the point, if 11% out and 11% got in, that to me, there's no change. Because there's a replacement investor there, unless somebody's buying to live in it. But I also know there's regular sales, if you will, of non-investment properties that become rental homes. So I think the whole thing's a wash. And with it, what I will say is this. There are a number of people that bought in for Airbnb properties. And, let's think of the reasons why it didn't work. Number one, they had really bad systems as far as answering the phone and setting up rentals, or they had an ineffective property manager. Some people don't want to pay a property manager, but then they don't answer the phone, and then they lose money. And they're like, well, I have to pay 18 or 25%. Well, sure, but you got no money coming in. Sometimes getting 80 or 75 or 80% of the money is a really good thing, because then you have to do the JOB. Some of the properties are not properly photographed. They do not have the right things in there. If they don't have nice bedding and nice furniture and great looking appliances and a view and parking, and creature comforts, like salt and pepper, stuff like that, and silverware and nice dishes, then probably somebody's not going to come back if it looks like it was put together out of a garage sale. I mean, who wants to pay top dollar for that? And then if you think about having a checklist at the move out, if the checklist has 100 different items on that a renter stays for 2-3 days and has to do like 6 hours of work to clean your place for you because of all your lists of rules, people tend to not come back and not give you really strong reviews. So those are just a few of the things that would cause someone to not do well with a short-term rental property. Now with that, if you don't have a great calendar to show your availability in a way for people to click online to secure it and pay for it, that could also be a problem. I would also say licensing comes into play at some point in time. And I realize that 100% of the people, 100% of the time, have the state, local, and county licenses to have short-term rental properties, and they would never do it without the licenses. So we'll just be above the fold on that. But let's suppose that just for a minute somebody's putting their toe over the line and didn't have one of those. what's the enforcement agency? Well, it might be the city or the county checking in and just see if you're licensed. It could be somebody checking online on the different websites and making phone calls and saying, hey, are you a short-term rental place? Like, well, that's funny. They don't allow those in our fair city. Now you're busted. Now you can't do it. You get a cease and desist, take down your website. So, there is a risk if you don't have all the licenses. And again, I'm sure everybody has all of them, but if they didn't, there would be some risk to that property being a short-term rental property, probably ongoing, because not every city or municipality allows short-term rentals. Within condo buildings, maybe the city allows short-term rentals. In our area, Daytona Beach Shores, there's nothing on the books to prevent it. So if you got a single-family home or a condo, you can rent it any way that you want. No big deal. It's one of the few in the area. But if the condo association that you happen to be in says nothing shorter than a month, then you've got to think about that. Or if it says nothing shorter than 6 months, that's another thing for you. So when you try to rent it sooner than a shorter time period than that, you could get yourself in a little hot water with the homeowners association because that would supersede the city's thing when there's no short-term rentals. So you can see right now it can be a can of worms, and a lot of people bought in thinking, I'm just going to Airbnb it and stick my toe over the line. Or maybe they just didn't realize that you had to have licenses. Now, I'm not the license police. I'm not telling you to do it, but that could be a reason things could go a little bit sideways. Now, once you have that Airbnb property, short-term rental is fully furnished, right down to the plates and knives and forks and all of that, if it doesn't work out that way and you go to short-term rent it, now you run into the problem that you've got a fully furnished property where not every renter wants to rent a home or a condo that's fully furnished with all the stuff like an Airbnb, because you know what? They got their own stuff. And you run into storage problems. So, who's going to put their stuff in storage? And when you eventually move out, who's going to inventory every last plate, fork, and knife? Well, certainly not me. So these are things that could get in the way of being successful in a short-term rental property. And by now you're saying, well, what are you going to do to guide me? You said you were going to mention the things that you should do if you're getting your first Airbnb property. Well, I gave you the don'ts. Now the do's, and this is probably what you're waiting to hear. Select a property in a location where people are likely to travel and want to rent properties. So what would that look like? Well, any area where there's hotels might be a really good candidate because people are renting and going to that area. So if you see multiple hotels, it means it's an area where people want to travel to. Destinations. Are you by a beach, a river, a mountain, a desert area, scenic landscape, mountains? What would it be that people would travel to do? Are you by a convention area? Are you by concerts? Would the property be close to sporting events? Would they be close to where they launch rockets into the air, like Cape Canaveral? So location is always going to be important, provided it's a location that people are likely to travel to and invest the money that wouldn't necessarily want to stay in a hotel. Maybe they've got multiple families, a lot of gear. They may want to work from there and use the Wi-Fi intermittently while they're on vacation. Any number of things. So you want an attractive location that would cause people to want to click on it to rent it. You're absolutely going to have to invest in photography. If you are going to take a couple of blurry photos and put it out there, no one's going to click on that. So amazing photography. And quite honestly, most phones are really, really good for taking pictures if you know a little bit about how to use them. You're going to have a little bit of technology in place, right? You're going to have to be able to put the property up on a website, use the calendar, update it, and understand what to charge, what the cleaning fees might be, and if there's rules, well, by all means, list them. I think you would need links to the area amenities, restaurants and things to do, and if it's hiking, fishing, boating, tennis, golf, I think the more you have attached to your property ad, the better off you're going to be, because people say, look at all the things I can do when I get there. Pictures of the sunrise or sunset, pictures of the waves or surfers if you're by the beach, pictures of nature if you're someplace that's out in the country. Maybe you're in the mountains of Georgia, and there's a stream that maybe you can fish in, or cross over, and trails, and do hiking. And are you near waterfalls where people would want to go to, or just amusement parks? I mean, it gets endless. But you want to have all of these things listed easily for the people to see. You want all the appliances top notch and working. Freezer space. Is there an ice cube maker so that they've got ice? Do you leave them a couple of bottles of water so when they arrive there's something there for them to drink if they haven't been to the store or they show up in the middle of the night? Is there electronic access to the door? Is it a key code that you could change and have several codes that can be changed out? That way, as people come in, you give them the code and then you change to the next code and the next code. But people get in. Keyless entry, super important. Is there safety and security on the grounds over there as far as, are you turning your cameras off when they arrive so you're not snooping around on them, making them all weirded out? More importantly, is there anything out there they should know about? If you're near the beaches and it's turtle nesting season, let them know to turn the lights down. If there's bears, do you have the bungee cords or something to strap down the garbage cans so the bears in the woods don't come visit your garbage cans? What are those things that are going to happen? If there's a hot tub, is there instructions on how to make it warmer or cooler? And just keep thinking about all the things that you have. What could plus it and make it better for your guests to arrive? It's going to make all the difference in the world. Now, understand it. If you're purchasing the property and you have the illusion of making $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 a month, not every property rents every day of the year or even every week of the year. So you're going to have to plan for some downtime when there's nobody in there. It's also a great time to do your inspections, your property maintenance, service all of your mechanics and appliances. When the property's not rented, that's the exact right time to get in there and do the maintenance stuff. That way you're not having issues within the time when somebody is renting the place. It's their vacation. You want to get 5-star reviews online, and if you're not doing that, you got to figure that out too. Super important to make sure it's the best possible experience for all of your guests all the time. The last thing you want to look at is the banking piece. Is it seamless to get the money from your online account to your bank account, and are you getting all of the invoices and taxes paid out if you're using a service, especially to make sure all the taxes are paid so that you get your tax paperwork at the end of the year to give to your CPA, or if you do the taxes yourself, doing that as well. The last thing you want is unpaid taxes on the property. There is typically a hotel tax at 12.5% in most areas. You see the same thing when you go stay at a hotel. You've got to charge that if it's 6 months or less in most cases. So I would speak to your realtor if you're using a realtor about that. Make sure the property is actually zoned for short-term rentals, and you can call the municipality, give them the address, and they'll just tell you yes or no. And I would want to know that before I bought a property and then found out that it doesn't do what I want it to do. Changing from the dynamics of a short-term rental to a long-term rental can be easy if you're willing to empty out the property and take a level amount of rent consistently over time versus spikes of really big rents followed by vacancies. It can work out in either direction. The short-term rental market can be very, very exciting and a little sexy, if that's what you want to call it, for some people, but there's work to be done, and it's not necessarily easy money until you get the property set up right, and then you could absolutely be printing money with your short-term rental Airbnb type property. So I hope that this gives you some idea of just a few of the things that you're going to encounter when you go down that path. If you got questions, drop them below. Definitely subscribe. And if you need to know more about this, just let me know. This is your host, Ron Wojciechowski, for the Black Hole of Real Estate.